Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2:30 p.m. I'll call this special council meeting to order and ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices. And I will begin with a territorial land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga and Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The municipality of Brighton also acknowledges the Mississauga nations as the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council approve the July 16th, 2024 special council meeting agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Members of council, have you any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. The topic of the special council meeting is an overview of the wastewater treatment facility background and historical context, which brings us to staff reports. The staff report is the wastewater treatment facility background and historical context, July 2024. Mr. Whiteman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
No, I do not. Just thought I can give an overview if that's.
I think that's probably wise.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to provide an overview of today's report. Firstly, I want to highlight that the staff report presented today bears resemblance to the ones with council on May 21 and June 17, respectively, seeking approval for scope changes and providing a historical context. This iteration includes additional documentation, as I think the many attachments which you've received. In today's report, staff continue to recommend the scope changes and have endeavored to compile the necessary information that was previously lacking for council's review. We acknowledge that much of this information should have been supplied earlier, and we recognize that staff proceeded without updating council at every step, which unfortunately contributed to some confusion. We agree wholeheartedly that council should always be kept informed of pertinent developments regarding the progress of the wastewater treatment project, and that arguably there were points in time that a large amount of information should have been provided to council. Appreciation of the importance of this need can be seen through the interactions with the ministry regarding the wastewater treatment project that have been ongoing for many years, with continual and constant contact with the ministry addressing immediate and ongoing issues, as noted through extensive documentation provided. Moving forward with this project is crucial, considering it has been a long-standing issue for the municipality of Brighton since circa 2008. Previous proposals have faltered, and despite challenges such as limited staff resources and aging infrastructure, our team has diligently kept the current system operational. This has been challenging given the compliance requirements stipulated by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. During this time, there have been ongoing discussions with ministry officials regarding a number of issues, and municipality Brighton staff have been and continue to be in constant contact with the ministry. So I just wanted to give you just that slight overview of what has transpired over time in past, I guess. I don't know, but it has been an ongoing issue. I would like hopefully to take this opportunity to ask Adam, who is our wastewater supervisor, to provide an update on the current status of the plant, discussing our limitations and challenges over the years. Adam will elaborate on the frequent repairs needed, often makeshift solutions, and highlight the donation of free aerators from Lindsay several years ago. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Director Whiteman. Mr. Walraven.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to have some time to speak here today. As Leslie noted, this has been a long going issue with the wastewater treatment plant and the facility. to date this year, we have already written 3 non-compliance letters for our TAN ammonia, and I anticipate another one to be written in July for the overall average for the month. Yeah, the treatment plant has certainly experienced its challenges. We received these aerators from Lindsay probably around 2016, if I recall correctly. And we've just kind of, I believe we received 11 of the aerators when Lindsay was doing their upgrade. We're currently using 3 of those aerators amongst pieces from the additional or the total of 11. So it's been an ongoing challenge keeping these aerators up and running. They're old equipment, and parts are limited and hard to come by. One of the other major challenges we do experience without any pre-screening or headworks per se in the building or in the facility, a lot of rags and debris enter the system, constantly being wrapped up into the aerators and providing a lot of challenges, maintenance issues for keeping the system running. That being said, even with all the aerators up and running, we are still shy on the amount of mixing horsepower that's adequate for keeping the system functioning properly. These warmer months are challenging for building the dissolved oxygen to allow the biomass and the bugs to work efficiently, and that's been an ongoing challenge just with the lack of the lack of equipment there. Often refer back to the analogy of building a house without having any tools to build it. If you had a whole bunch of wood, you'd still struggle to build the house without any tools. So that's kind of essentially where I feel as though we're at with the treatment plant. We've kind of exhausted a number of engineer reports, recommendations, and I would advocate for this new proposal, this new design for the system to come in place. I personally, as the ORO, don't care to write any more non-compliance letters to the ministry and have my name associated with the long faltering of the wastewater treatment plant. So I am advocating for this new system, and I do look forward to making Brighton industry success story. We can turn the page and move forward with some compliant and good treatment. So I just made a few notes here. I just want to even we've tried many different attempts and process modifications that just have proven inconsistent results, and ultimately I'm confident that with the mechanical system we will remain in compliance and for years to come. It would also allow the opportunity for some capacity expansion down the road, which I think we're all in agreement that we're coming to that bridge, and will require some attention to that in the near future. Even with the process modifications, we've had some success with it, but it's just been very inconsistent results. So I do believe it is time that we turn the page and move forward with providing some adequate wastewater treatment for the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Walraven.
Thank you.
CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council. Just if I could provide you an update, we did have a meeting with the MECP as well as our consultants last week. And moving forward, you will receive the minutes. You've seen the copies that are in your packages now, but moving forward, you will see those minutes on the next council agenda. There was some discussion about where we're at and the expectations with our timelines. We did ask MECP, should council make a different decision and go in a different direction, how that will impact us and the compliance issues that we're experiencing. Very open discussion about the fact that they expect that we're going to maintain our timelines. In a subsequent email, I do just want to point out, this came in think earlier this week or the very end of last week. So it's not included in your package. But I think it is important to note just where the ministry is at. So they do indicate that there has been an approved schedule. They have the documentation as such, and they do state that the ministry is understanding of the complexity of the project undertaken in supportive of the work of the municipality to ensure reasonable timelines are agreed upon. However, given the long history of non-compliance and failure to address the TAN issues at the Brighton WPCP, the ministry is not supportive of prolonged disruptions of the resolution of compliance issues at the Brighton WPCP. Please be aware that failure to show that the municipality is committed to the resolution of compliance issues identified at the Brighton WPCP could result in the escalation of compliance action. And we did identify that in the report, just indicating the previous fines that had been placed on the municipality, the exceptions that had been made, the waiving of some, the second time around the increase, and that we would anticipate further increases if we continue to be non-compliant. So just thought it was important to bring this to council's attention. That's coming from the MECP specifically, that we would be subject to additional fines if we continue with non-compliance.
Thank you, CAO. Director Whiteman, any further comments?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. The motion before me is moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the report dated July 16th, 2024, wastewater treatment facility background and historical context, update and approve. Continuing to move forward with upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility, inclusive of the following scope changes, as recommended to council on May 21st, 2024. It is recommended the council approve additional funding resulting from scope changes required to augment the design for the upgrade to the Brighton wastewater treatment facility, referring to the staff report entitled Award of the Request for Proposal PW 2023-07, Brighton wastewater treatment system upgrade dated June 19th, 2024, for which the engineer design consultants J.L. Richards and Associates Limited were awarded RFP PW 2023-07. Although the initial award for the RFP was over budget by $161,228.54, net of the HST rebate, the design consultants J.L. Richards have recently issued 6 scope changes. The following scope changes have been issued and requested by them for a total amount of $406,923.99 net of HST. Scope change 1, request change to undertake Schedule B addendum, total $20,235.99 net of HST rebate. Scope change 2, support of the HEWSF application, total $5,342.40 net of HST rebate. Scope change 3, design consideration from VE exercise, total $127,963.20 net of HST rebate. Scope change 4, design requirements for additions or modifications, total $131,779.20 net of HST rebate. Scope change 5, design for receiving septage, total $75,556.80 net of HST rebate. Scope change 6, additional water required for building and firefighting, resulting option 2 total $46,046.40 net of HST rebate. Total scope changes 1 through 6 total $406,923.99 net of HST rebate. The request for additional funds for the design of the upgrade to the WWTF is estimated to be $568,152.53 net of HST rebate. This amount is inclusive of work involving the scope changes, scope change 1 through scope change 6, along with the original amount that was over budget for the award of the RFP. The design consultants have indicated that no additional scope changes are foreseen in completing the design of the upgrade to the wastewater treatment facility. Before I open the floor to discussion, I'm wondering if the motion right now reads as the recommendation, but it doesn't provide direction. So it says, for example, it is recommended that council approve, and I think it should say that council approve as a motion. That provides direction. Is that okay with you as the mover and you as the seconder? That in the motion, we're actually providing direction, not just reading a recommendation from staff. And then in the final, the request for additional funds for the design, et cetera, I think it should be that council provide additional funds or direct additional funds, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just changing the first few words. There'll be a lot of discussion over this motion. I will reread the motion before we vote on it because by the time we get there, we'll all have forgotten what it says. Questions or comments from members of council? Councilor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just, and if I can, just one clarification as far as the motion goes. Those dollars we have already committed to as far as those scope changes have been done by JL Richards. And we can't take any of 1 to 6 out of the proposal, correct?
Director Whiteman.
Scope change 1 and scope change, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rowley, my apologies. Scope change 1 and scope change 2, we have already issued those, but not 3 through 6.
Thank you for that for now. I might follow up as we get more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. I should forewarn my colleagues that I have 15 questions, each with 4 or 5 sub-questions. So I hope you had a good lunch.
But we have agreed you will ask one at a time, and then we'll
Yes.
give opportunity for other members of council.
Yes, yes, Your Worship, we have.
Carry on, Councillor.
I guess my first question relates to the scope changes. I believe I heard in the summary of the motion that there was $75,000 for scope change for septage. And a little later on, when I get to ask my question about septage and point out the economics and the fact that it's not viable, does that negate that $75,000 for that scope change 5?
Director Whiteman.
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fredis, it has not been issued. So as far as I'm concerned, it's something that we could discuss and not go through with. So yeah, I agree with you.
Thank you. That was your first question. You're giving me a chance to go to others. Is that what I'm saying? Okay. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Botwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So it's my understanding that they have already incurred the cost of $160,000 and are looking for approval to continue incurring costs. Is that where we're at?
That is correct.
So they have not been incurred yet, because that would be done without council approval and would be outside the purchasing policy, correct?
The only 2 that have been incurred are the Schedule B addendum of $20,000+ and the support for the application, the Housing Enabling Water Systems, whatever it's called, HEWSF application of just over $5,000.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, as I recall, and as I understand it, council approved $1 million for this work. The 2 bidders, JL Richards and SEMA, were relatively close. JL Richards was the better of the 2. It was 158,000 and change over budget. And somehow or other, we missed incorporating that differential in the 2024 capital budget, which is why it's now carried forward into this request, if I understand that correctly. Did I get that right, Director Whiteman?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Fredis, that is correct. We had planned for it in 22 for the 23 budget. And it was not foreseen that we should have addressed it then and there or in 24. So that's the history.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. Director Whiteman and Mr. Walraven, first off, congratulations on doing a yeoman's job in keeping our wastewater system going and endeavoring to hit compliance targets and limits in light of the municipality's longstanding failure to invest in the facility. But one of the things that you cited was the use of used aerators picked up off-site. And I think that was fairly evident in many of your wastewater reports, and I've gone back to read quite a number of years of them. We have always been aerating at 1/4 of the recommended rate for MECP. And my recollection of the April 25, 2022 council meeting, there was a proposal put forth by GSS, peer reviewed by RBA, that talked about a triple point aeration system that would have at least quadrupled the aeration in our lagoon system. And that was kind of the genesis for this whole thing. And we've come away from that, but I went back and checked some history, and I just wanted to share this with you. And I do have some questions that result from that. One of the things that I read is that the option 2 mechanical system for the June report and early reports was the preference because the option 1 lagoon system could not guarantee adequate TAN control, especially during the winter months. Now, the history says that over the last 9 years, we have only had a TAN issue 11 times in the cold weather months, but in the warm weather months, we've had 36 occurrences, 3 times the rate. The new aeration tanks proposed and confirmed by J.L. Richards are not enclosed. They are simply open top concrete tanks exposed to the same elements as the lagoon system. So those 2 things lead me to believe, why would we expect different TAN numbers, weather related? In addition, in their report, tab 1, page 318, J.R. Richards in their TM3 liquid train addresses the TAN numbers for the lagoon versus the purpose-built bioreactors. And the data, and I can leave this with you if you like, but the model predicted average effluent for TAN on the option A 1-cell lagoon in the cold weather scenario 1, which is without septage, was 0.53 milligrams per liter. The option 2 lagoon, which is basically splitting our current lagoon, is 0.48 milligrams per liter. And the option C, new bioreactors, is 0.60 milligrams per liter. So it has a higher predicted TAN effluent than the lagoon option. And interestingly enough, when I look at the TAN targets that they modeled the bioreactor at 10 degrees C and 5 degrees and 8 degrees C respectively for the lagoon. So I'm having difficulty understanding how these mechanical bioreactors are really going to guarantee better TAN performance than the lagoons, because as I understand the data from Mr. Walraven, our problem is not coming out of the aeration lagoon. Our problem emanates from the stabilization pond and the sludge buildup there releasing TAN. Did I understand that correctly, or am I all wet? Could you clarify for me, please?
Mr. Walraven.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Fredis. Yeah, you do understand that to a certain degree. I think there's some other variables that come into play. One of the things that we certainly recognized as working through this design process, it would be very challenging to upgrade the current lagoon system and aeration system while still allowing every one of our residents to continue to flush their toilets, have showers, use the system. We would certainly be limiting the treatment adequacy by taking the aeration system offline to do an upgrade. And some other variables that come into play are the massive storm surges. When we with the current system, we just don't have any control over mitigating how much flow is coming into the system. For example, last week's storm surge brought our flows up over 7,000 cubic meters per day, essentially washing out a good portion of our beneficial bacteria and our biomass in the aeration pond. So that takes some time to reestablish, and when I say take some time, we're probably 4 to 6 weeks to reestablish a healthy community in the aeration pond. And the costing for construction was something that was brought to our attention to construct the triple point system and implement clarifiers and the remainder of the construction for the proposed upgrade. It was going to be complicated for construction to continue to provide treatment for the municipality while performing the upgrade construction. The mechanical system kind of alleviated some of those concerns in terms of we can construct the mechanical plant and then switch over to the mechanical plant once it's constructed. That would have all the components in place. The new mechanical plant would offer us some control of the storm surges where we are able to possibly either bypass one aeration tank, keeping our biomass and our bacteria intact and performing to their best of their adequacy, and then once the storm surge alleviates, we were able to mitigate that second aeration tank. So it's some more control over some variables that pose issues with us now. I think notably we touched on acquiring Lindsay's old aeration system. That was in the midst of them doing a plant upgrade, and essentially they implemented the same type of design or mechanical plant that we are proposing. And once they got that system online, they've been in compliance ever since. So that's worth noting, I believe.
Follow up.
To the chair, if I may, because I believe Mr. Walraven touched on I&I, inflow and infiltration as having an impact. So first off, as I understand your answer is the benefit to the mechanical system is we're still required to treat while we're doing construction, and to address the lagoons would require them taking them out of commission, and there's apparently nothing in the way of portable pieces of equipment that could replace them during that period. Did I understand that correct?
Not for our sizes.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Walraven, you need to speak into the microphone because there may be
Pardon me.
likely people watching on YouTube.
Pardon me. Yeah, not for our size of the system. I don't believe there's any kind of portable package plant that will adequately treat to our 4,600 cubic meter a day.
Okay. Now, just a follow up to that, Mr. Mayor, if I may, because Mr. Walraven, you talked about inflow and infiltration. And again, in reading your reports going back as many years as I could get my hands on, and it's fascinating reading, by the way, thank you. It has been a major issue and contributing to our TAN problem because of the biomass washout, correct? So I went back and looked at the numbers for the past 8 years, and I've used the annual reports for both water production distribution and wastewater. And I've used the simple rationale, gallon of water out from our water system means a gallon of water in to our waste treatment system. All right, the simple arithmetic. And tried to use that as a basis for determining how big a problem I really is. And what the data tells me, going back to 2016, that our average water out was 883,203 cubic meters. In that same period, our metered effluent inflow was 1,146,221 M3. So we have an average differential of 263,019 M3. In other words, 29.78% of our presumed capacity in our wastewater system is contending with I and contributing to the biomass washout. And maybe I misunderstand this, but it would seem to me, short of putting a dome over it, if we were somehow able to capture the I, we could recover a fairly significant portion of our capacity and minimize the biomass washout and thereby reduce our exceedance issues. First off, did I get that correctly? And secondly, I think in an earlier conversation, we talked about a bylaw enacted in 2017 that provided municipality with the measures and the tools to go after the some of the I concerns, which is some pumps being pumped into the sewer system. Have we made any material progress on that?
Director Whitman?
Yes, we are undergoing an I study right now as we speak. We're also doing some flushing of our system. I don't think we have all the data and all the information as it stands at this point. Maybe Adam can comment on that. But we try to incorporate the dry and the wet season as well. So what obviously has more flow. I believe that is correct, and maybe others can comment, those who are more of an expert, have more expertise than I do. But it sounds logical, what you have proposed. I think we have to wait and see what the I determine, what the determination of all that is, and if it is a significant factor or not, we'll have to see. But to answer you directly at this point in time, and maybe someone else can comment, I'm not sure that it is a significant factor. It may be, but I think the information and the data that we collect will be telling.
Thank you. Any other members of council have questions or comments? Councillor Rowley.
Not as technical as Councillor Paredes. Page 96 of 1143. Just and it just came to my attention when I was reading through this. Presque Isle Provincial Park. Are they still online with us? I know there was a time when we thought there was a concern with how the pumping station there or what the chemicals in the recreational vehicles were affecting our system. And I was just looking for an answer on that for right now. Is Presque Isle still connected to our system?
Mr. Walraven.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rowley. Yes, a portion of Presque Isle is still on the system. However, when we identified the potential problems of RV connection or RV chemicals, getting into our system and having adverse effects on our treatment, we encouraged the park to separate that system. So at that time, they took that portion, the RV dumping station, offline and created their own septic system for that. However, we do still receive the pump sewage from the comfort stations around the park, which are essentially washrooms, shower facilities around the camping areas of the park. So no, there is no RV connection to the system anymore. but we are still on average probably about 50 cubic meter a day from the park that we receive from the comfort stations.
So that's fairly insignificant. It's the 50 cube.
Relatively so. I'm thinking that the comfort stations are designed to be low water. So, you know, I would assume that the concentration, the strength of the sewage is still relatively high, but it's not containing the chemicals of the RV, you know, the formaldehydes and so on that we suspected had an adverse effect on our treatment system.
Thank you both. For the record, Councillor Butwell left the chambers at 3:03 p.m. Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Is it just the sump pumps that are adding load to the system, or is there other factors involved?
Director Whiteman, Mr. Walraven.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wright. Some pumps do have a significant impact on the system, especially part of the southern end of Brighton, where, you know, the water tables are typically higher. We're contending with Baywater. You know, Brighton by the Bay has always been identified as a bit of a significant contributor to that based on the design criteria that they had upon construction. And then you know, the water levels I guess the backfill in Brighton by the Bay, from what I understand, is majority of sand. So lots of percolation through the soils and inevitably entering foundation drains, contributing to some pump discharging into our system. However, that is not the lone issue for our inflow and infiltration. Gaps in the pipe, manholes, any other places of entry would contribute to the heavier flows as well.
Thank you both. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. With regard to the park, and that you said they disconnected the sandy dump basically from their export to us. If we went to the MBBR, would they reconnect to us, or would that remain disconnected from us?
Mr. Walraven.
Yes, through you, Chair. Councillor Wheeldon, no, I don't believe that will ever become a scenario again where we'll be connecting the RV discharge. I wouldn't feel confident allowing that discharge into our system, knowing, you know, the potential adverse effects it had in the past. So the park put a significant amount of money in place to allow their RV dump station to continue to function by not adding it into our system. So they're isolated now, and I don't anticipate it ever coming back onto the system.
Thank you both. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. If I could just come back to the septage issue. On if I can find my note here, tab 1, page 37 of the J.R. Richards report, it outlined the economics of the septage receiving and indicated a total capital cost of 1.93 million and a return ranging from 24,000 to 356,000, depending on the utilization. And they calculated a return on investment of 6 to 80 years. In a subsequent conversation with Mr. Markham, he was kind enough to provide me with some data from surrounding municipalities, Campbellford, Trent Hills, Port Hope, and Peterborough. So I've set Peterborough aside because it's a much bigger multi-operation entity and focused on Campbellford, Trent Hills, and Port Hope. And the average of those facilities is 41 meters per day. And the economics in here was, I think, calculated based on doing 50 M3 per day. I then reached out and found out the septage rate from, I believe it was Port Hope. Yes, Port Hope. And theirs is 0.013 cents per liter. And at 1,000 liters per cubic meter, it's about $13. Now, using 41 as our basis on, I get 205 meters per week, 52 weeks a year. I get 10,660 M3. If I can compute that at $13, assuming that we're at a competitive rate to Port Hope, we generate 138,500 in annual income, but the JLR assessment is that operating and maintenance cost would be 117,000. So we'd net 21,500. So if I take 1.93 million and divide it by the 21,500 net revenue, I calculate that we'd get an 89-year payback. In light of those economics, would you not agree that perhaps we simply remove that from this scope and let our good friends in Port Hope, Trent Hills, and Campbellford enjoy the luxury of this business?
I think that's a council decision at the end of the day. But we hear your point. Thank you, Councillor Fredis. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. So I'm looking at page 59 of the report regarding capacity and growth. And I know there's been some talk with my colleagues as well that we're not exactly sure what the growth number as far as housing goes. We've heard probably over the last few days, 3 or 4 different ones really. Last night at the presentation and with speaking with the builders. So I'd like a clear, definite number as far as that goes, because I'm guessing that at the end of the day, that will also kind of affect capacity in the future if we're, if we're looking 5 to 10 years out. If we're going with a low growth number at this stage, it makes it look like maybe we don't need as much capacity, but my feeling is that the future forecasts that our growth numbers are going to be higher. So I'm not sure if you can answer those questions, but maybe at some point we can get a hard number from staff as far as what exactly we are going to be forecasted in the future.
The problem with growth numbers is it's crystal balling.
Exactly.
Nobody can ever tell us what we are. We do know that today, based on last night's numbers, we know we're outpacing the growth numbers. We have a higher level of growth than those who thought, those who brought those numbers thought we would have. So when I was looking at those numbers last night, we are about 1,000 people, give or take, more today. Was it that many? Yeah, almost 1,000 more than what those growth numbers in the development charges study showed us.
Correct.
So, Director Walsh, as he who manages building and planning, what's your crystal ball tell you?
Your Worship, I was crunching some numbers last night too, looking at the presentation, and the Richards numbers were 56 dwelling units per year on average hooking into the system. Historically, over the last 10 years, it's been 65 per year. And those comments were passed on to Watson Associates. They, in most recent version of the background study, they did incorporate the 65 as I verified last night. Yeah, right into the year of 2051.
Okay.
But as to your point, it is crystal balling. We've had some years that were, 125 units per year. So it does vary quite a bit. And recently we've had some additional subdivisions which might increase supply, sometimes increases demand. And I think that's been our history here.
And let's be real, our friends at the province would prefer that those numbers be larger than smaller at the end of the day. And we are in an attractive area of the province of Ontario where we may very likely see the numbers start to peak up. But again, I don't know.
Correct. And
Counselor Rowley.
I get that as well. I don't know either. And I know it's a bit of crystal balling. However, we can't crystal ball capacity in a sewage treatment plant, correct? We will have hard, fast numbers, and who knows where we are in 10 years. So how does that affect what we're going to do? Are we going to base new capacity on a smaller number? And then in 10 years, find that we're going to go through this whole process again because the system that we have will already be over capacity. We need to make sure if we're going to do this once, that we do it to carry us into the future and not based on low numbers, based on
So
average to high.
what's before us right now is a scalable model, but does not provide any increase in capacity at the moment. So what's before us now is fixing our problem, fixing our ammonia problem, and with a scalable system that will allow us to add on. But I wonder if Mr. Morcom, you could chime in on, people are looking behind them. I'm pointing to Mr. Morcom on the screen. So behind me, if you look behind me, Mr. Morcom, if you're there, perhaps you could chime in on the scalability of this proposal, the design that you're working on, and what that scalability would allow us to increase to over time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Yeah, so we have accounted for additional tankage and tried to leave space for it to allow it to be constructed in the future. We are integrating into the building larger spaces to allow future equipment to be put in, additional channels to be installed to allow this. As most of you know, in order to increase the capacity, we have to go through a Schedule CEA. And as part of that, the ministry would dictate what effluent criteria we have to put out. Now, we're anticipating that they would stick with this, but we don't know that until we do the studies. So we are trying to accommodate the growth to go to around 6,000 is kind of the number that has been kind of used as that next step. But until you go through the Schedule EA, and you have to look at where your effluent is going to determine what quality of effluent you have to put out, we may have to get in some additional pieces. But the plant that is currently being designed is what's called the conventional activated sludge plant, which is tried and true to Ontario, has lots of applications, and is expandable from that perspective.
Councillor Wright.
Back on the April 25th meeting in 2022, when council made the decision for a lagoon-based application, one of the councillors asked because I think it had been pointed out at that time that the lagoon-based system upgrade would make the wetland redundant that it was being pushed into. Does this system make the wetland redundant, or are we going to still be utilizing the wetland?
Director Whiteman, Mr. Walraven.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. To Councillor Wright, for this proposal, the effluent criteria would be established at the effluent of the mechanical plant. So the constructed wetland would still remain in place as a polishing aspect to our treatment facility, and potentially providing that tertiary quality treatment for the municipality. However, the variables that come into play, the ministry advised us that we wouldn't be able to continue to utilize, and even as of right now, we don't utilize the constructed wetland for our effluent criteria. It is simply in place as an additional portion or process to the treatment facility that adds some polishing, enhanced treatment criteria for it. So we wouldn't be sampling from the constructed wetland for ministry compliance. However, we would continue to sample from it to understand what the treatment aspects are and impacts of it. So it will not be coming offline, but it's not a part of the compliance factors that the ministry will put in place.
And it's not now.
It is not now, no.
Thank you. Councillor Freitas.
Through the chair, thank you. I guess just to build on Councillor Rowley's comments and concerns about capacity and the implications. The current system is configured, or the proposed system is configured for 4600 M3, and the JLR addendum calculates a 5-year average flow of 3290 M3 per day, and using MECP guidelines. And they then indicated a residual projected flow of 1200 M3 and projected capacity to 2041, at which point we'd be at 98% by their calculations. However, the Director of Planning, Mr. Walsh, did a calculation on tab 5, page 928 of the report of the build-out available based on a 3-year average of 2879 M3, but that was skewed by lower COVID years. The Director's calculation for build-out based on the lower inflow average was 730 homes, and based on 65 homes per year, it would seem to indicate we'd only get out to 2034 and not 2041. However, I took the liberty of taking the Director's calculations, and forgive me, Director, and tweaking the numbers based on a current projected average of 3290, and then did the recomputation per year formula, and I only get 438 homes at our current average, which means we'd be out of capacity by 2030, which means we would need to be building the expansion by 2028. Now, I reached out to Mr. Markham, and he was kind enough to share with me some numbers. And what he explained to me was, if we were to build the capacity increase now, it would cost us $12.5 to $17.5 million based on 2024 dollars. But if we wait until we're out of capacity and have to initiate it as a new project, we're looking at a capital cost of $25 to $30 million. All of a sudden now we have a wastewater system that costs $60 million if we do that. So I would like to suggest that we spend a whole lot more time on capacity numbers and build out, so that we do this once and do it right. Because I'd hate to see us box ourselves in where we believe that we have more capacity than we have, and then we're facing a $30 million bill when we had the opportunity to make it half of that. Director Welch, do you have any comments on my calculation of your numbers? Because I did share them with you.
Through your worship to council, sure, the MOE guidelines say go with the 3 years as a minimum. And that's what my original calculation just used those 3 years, partly because the year previous to the third most distant year was a flood year. And I felt that might throw things off a little bit. But with climate change going forward, who knows what volatility we're going to get. But previous calculations looking at the average daily flows that included the year of 2019, which was, and 2019 flows, as Adam might correct me if I'm wrong, were lower than the worst of the flood years was 2017. But by including the 2019 into a 3-year average, I think the per capita rate was 490. And by excluding 2017 and going with the most recent past 3 years, the average per capita daily flow was 390. So that's how much of a difference 1 year can make. So yeah, we'll have some volatility going forward, and perhaps that's why our consulting engineers suggest going with a longer time frame to average out that volatility a little bit, maybe go with the 5-year, even though the MOE guidelines say 3 years. It also says that the director of the ministry can specify the time frame used in those calculations. But to your point, yeah, it would be nice to have capacity for some of those higher numbers in the event of risk of higher flows.
Thank you both. Certainly agree with you from an economies of scale perspective. Sorry, at 3:23, Councillor Butwell returned to the chambers for the record. From an economies of scale perspective, I certainly agree with, build it now. It's usually cheaper than building it tomorrow. But I also understand that if we were to go down that road, we would then need to do a Class CEA, which would then put us behind our schedule, our MECP schedule to get this construction underway. So I'm just cognizant of timelines and where our friends at the ministry expect us to be as we move forward. But again, all council decisions at the end of the day. Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, yes, I did understand from Mr. Markham that we would have to upgrade the EA addendum, and it would cause some complications. But I think the other factor that we need to bear in this is that we already have some 388 homes already approved to build. And if the number really is 438, we have nothing. Additionally, what the director has highlighted in his report is that he has complete or draft plans for 855 additional units, plus pre-consultation developments of an additional 1,723. So we have something like 2,500 homes potential build out within the next decade. Clearly, if these numbers are to be believed, we're not going to make it unless we do something with our capacity, which is why I'm suggesting we need to really double down on this whole capacity and calculation to figure out what we need to do. We may have to bite the bullet on a Schedule C, but I would hate to see us, for expediency's sake, not wanting to do that addendum and then in 2 years' time have no development left and facing a $30 million bill when we could have made it 15.
So again, I agree with you on the economies of scale perspective. Well, let's set that aside for a second, because I think if we do want to go down that road, we can have that discussion after we deal with the motion in front of us. But I think it's a separate motion to direct staff to engage with the MECP on the possibility. We've been working in concert and partnership with the MECP this whole time. We don't want to provide direction to staff that takes us off the rails of that. So we want to make sure we're working in concert with them as we go down the road. Mr. Walraven.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification. Staff requested JLR crunch some numbers for us in terms of the build cost for the expansion, not necessarily going through that Class C addendum right now, but setting ourselves up for when we do. Now that would have to take some consultation through the ministry to understand if they're on board and would allow us to. However, it would be still under our 4,600 cubic meter capacity limit right now, and then build the additional expansion as we're constructing the new facility to allow us to kind of expedite the Class C and the construction at that point, in turn saving us some money to construct it now versus down the road sooner than later.
Mr. Walraven, could you just repeat the last portion of that? So as I understand it, what you said is the intent would be to construct the expansion but not bring it online. Is that what you said?
Correct. Yes.
So
yes.
that's included in the costings that we see in front of us.
I do believe, and JLR can correct me if I'm wrong, those numbers associated with the build costs were kind of to build the additional tanks for the expansion during our construction phase now versus doing it in, say 5 years time. We will still have to go through the Class C and the consultation through ministry, but essentially we'd be set up with our treatment facility to accommodate the additional capacity.
Director?
Yes, can I just add to that? I think we do need to communicate and have communication with the MECP on that matter. We don't have that as a conclusive thing, but it has to be in consultation with them. We have not really discussed this with them but it's something that we are considering so that we can save some money somewhere, given that we build it now or future-proof it as such.
And when will those discussions with the MECP take place?
After our discussions today, hopefully.
And the intent will, for staff will be to bring that information back to council, right? Okay, thank you. Councilor Rowley.
Thank you. And I guess Adam kind of answered my questions. I was wondering if we could do the building and the consultation for the Class C kind of hand in hand with what's going on now, but I think you pretty well answered that. Thank you, Ed.
And my understanding is the MECP doesn't really like you to go down the road until you're at capacity plus, right? They usually wait till you're over capacity to get you to start it or to allow you permission to start initiating. And certainly, we wouldn't get any funding likely from the province until we're at 110% capacity, because that's just how it works.
Seems odd why the horse would be already outside the barn when we
Right.
need to get the money. Thank you.
100%. Councillor Wheeldon.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to staff for putting this massive information package together and for keeping us going all this time. There's an enormous amount of detail in here. And I'm not technically qualified in any of this. But I also recognize that it's your expertise that matters here, even if I were. So I do rely on what you've given us here, and I think it's relatively clear as a non-expert even. What's most clear to me is that a lot of people have put a lot of time into this. And so I trust your recommendation. My priorities in this entire discussion are making sure that we have a system that works, first of all. And so correcting the problem obviously is a huge priority. Making sure that we have a system that is future-proofed so that we can easily expand when we need to, as we all agree we will need to very soon, if not already. And making sure that, or as much as we can, get the best bang for buck in the process. So with those three priorities in mind, and understanding that we've had three different engineering firms, as well as our own staff and ministry, all weighing in on multiple options as this has morphed and evolved, is this the best system we can hope for according to those three priorities?
Mr. Walraven.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you to Councillor Wheeldon. Yeah, that is certainly the top of our priorities and consideration in going through this design phase is future-proof, bang for buck, and certainly most importantly, fixing our compliance issues. So yes, I do believe that this system is tried and tested throughout Ontario. It will allow us to control the variables that complicate our treatment adequacy right now. And I definitely stand behind this proposal for the mechanicalized system.
Thank you both. Councillor Botwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to either the director or Mr. Walraven. We heard at the last meeting, I believe the question was asked about sludge removal in the polishing basin, and 25%, I think, had been completed. I don't believe there was an answer about why we did not continue down that road. Could somebody provide that answer for me?
Mr.
Pardon me,
Walraven?
and just to qualify that, it was one of the ways to help reduce our TAM. It was about capacity in that basin. We also had the suggestion of the downspouts being through by-law enforcement. So perhaps I'll just then combine it with, if we've only removed 25% of what we should have, and we are not enforcing the bylaw, then perhaps it's our fault that we are not getting the capacity that we need. And why are we not doing these things if we've already identified them as part of the problem?
Mr. Walraven.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Butwell. There's no doubt that the I&I issue is a longstanding problem. And we're going to continue to work diligently to isolate the inflow and infiltration into the system. That being said, I don't ever think that we will 100% eliminate some I&I issues from our system. And based on storm surges, snow melts, different variables, we will continue to see some excess flows into the system. Now, one of the components to the new system that I think will help quite significantly in this is an equalization pond, where we would be able to divert some of the excess flows into a whole holding pond, essentially. And then once the flows subside, we're able to meter that back into the system to treat it adequately. That saves us from rushing it through the system, washing out any biomass or having any kind of adverse effects on the treatment system. To touch on the sludge removal, I've been here 12 years, I suppose, doing this wastewater for the municipality, and have seen several desludging programs over the years, as much as 100% of the pond. And yes, it does seem to work for a short period of time, but we can't bank on the fact that with the sludge removal, we're going to meet compliance issues. There's just other variables that come into play, like the I&I and such, that will have adverse effects on the system. So we could have potentially desludged some more, and it could have potentially brought us into a compliance window. Now, that being said, it's been a very wet summer, so to speak, and I suspect we would have still seen our issues in compliance regardless of taking the sludge out. Staff have been focused on progressing with this design and the upgrades to the system, and didn't know if that would be best effort spent to do the remainder of the desludging. The first part of the desludging program was the 4-bay, so to speak, the influent area of the stabilization lagoon, where the majority of the sludge bulking exists. So was fairly confident that, and I do suspect it was a bit more, probably closer to 35% of the lagoon that was desludged, and the remainder of that proved to be lower levels of sludge volume in the pond, which is also a deeper section of the lagoon, providing more water over top, providing better treatment components to that. So I'm not sure our money would have been best spent to do another $500,000 or $600,000 desludging program, to not ensure guaranteed results for that.
Just a follow-up. Go ahead.
So the desludging was halted at a certain point because of funds. Is that how I understand it?
Director?
Councillor Butwell, no, we had the funds. We have, I think, in our contracted services, there are funds available.
Okay, so if we had funds available and we had direction from this council to do the work, why did we not do it? And why, when we don't have the funds and we don't have correction or direction from council, do we go down a road where this project is sprung on us 5-6 months later?
Let's answer the first question first.
I think we made a decision. We were in consultation with the ministry, and it did appear to us that it could be wasteful expenditure, for lack of a better term. And given that we were on this road to the design with J.L. Richards and that they were commissioned to do so. So it was our feeling that in time to come, we could use that money better spent.
And was council ever informed that the sludge removal was suspended?
No. I think we were also contemplating what to do and where we were in relation to our engagement with the ministry and the direction that we were going. We were also involved at the time in putting the application together, getting everything together as we were doing so. We actually have Adam and myself on the team, and that is the extent of what we have or had. And we really felt it would be best if we're moving in the direction, let's move down that road that we thought would be in the best interest of the municipality.
But we understand now that when council provides direction, that direction is carried out, and if there's a change to be made, it comes to council for that decision.
Correct.
Thank you. Follow up?
So this project changed directions, as best as I can tell, sometime between thereabouts November 13th and December 23rd, 2023. At some point in that range, when this.
Director?
To answer Councillor Butwell, yes, that I would say would be a fair estimation. However, we never made a final decision between those dates.
It's okay.
We were waiting for some further engagement with the ministry, as well, discussions with ourselves. It was never definitive, I think, in those dates, and Adam can correct me, that we think it was more a comfortable decision possibly in January and February. It's a moving process, I guess is the best way to put it.
So again, if this was a regulatory decision from the MECP or encouraged by the MECP, council would understand that. But given council's direction, we need to be kept informed as systems go on.
Correct.
I'm just hammering away at this, and I know you understand that now, but this can't happen again. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you. I seem to be developing more follow-up questions the more that we get into this. So I'm going to maybe pop a few off. They're related to this whole, like this back and forth. And
You pop one off and
I'll
then
pop
see
one
where it
off.
goes.
Let's do that. So speaking of J.L. Richards and last year, so they were the recipients of the RFP. And up until November, December, when the landscape began to change, they would have had to have completed 15% as per the schedule. That would have been based on what we as council thought was happening. How much of that 15% did they make within that timeline?
Director?
To answer Councillor Butwell, I can't, off the top of my head, I won't be able to answer you directly. I'd have to go back into the records and answer that question.
Mr. Morcom, do you have an answer to that question?
I guess I would need a bit more clarification on sorry, you're asking about the 15%, what was in the 15%? Is that what you're asking?
So the initial 15% of the design phase, I believe, was to be hit. That benchmark was to be hit by November of 2023. If we had not changed this mechanical system idea, then how much of that did we actually make? If we're talking about making deadlines, because that RFP set out timelines, did it not?
That's correct. It did set out timelines. So as part of that, we were working towards the 15%. At that time, that's when the option 1 versus option 2 was in the November-December timeframe. So we paused on the 15% because we saw an avenue here that may cost overall the capital may be more. So that's when we went through that value engineering. And so we moved a bit of the value engineering up, looked at that, and then continued with the 15% in January, February.
Follow-up?
Follow-up. So we have 5 months lag there where we were working, or we were supposed to be working to hit that first cutoff of 15% based on what council had approved. Can you explain to me how much of that actually happened, or was nothing done? No work done on the system that for the design that council had approved?
No, so there was a fair amount done as part of that, including all of the tech memos. So 1 through 5 of all of the different components, looking at all the different options for headwork, septage, liquid train, solids train, and then the EV or the solar and the power requirements. So we looked at all of those pieces and developed options for all of those that would be developed into the 15%, which was all based on the lagoon-based aeration system with the clarifiers. And then added in the different components. It was at that point that we paused for some value engineering, some preliminary value engineering to look at if dividing up the lagoon, the aeration lagoon was going to cost more, that maybe we should look at something else, or we should deviate from that.
So did you complete
Questions through the chair?
through the chair? Did they complete the 15%? Did they meet the timeline? Yes or no?
Mr. Morcom?
As laid out in the RFP, no.
Thank you.
We've already established that council should have been kept informed of those changes. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. I think one of the things that came out very clearly in the initial configuration changes from GSS RVA was that sludge management was a critical issue because of its contribution to TAN exceedance, and because of the ongoing operational cost of having to desludge. As I read the tab 3, page 598 of our Hughes application, and also tab 1, page 19, our current plan now is to return RAS sludge to the aeration pond and waste sludge to the stabilization pond or facultative lagoon. Am I correct in that, Director Whiteman?
Mr. Walraven.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Fredis. No, that is a bit of a skewed thought. Okay, so the return activated sludge would be returned to the aeration basins as per design, the aeration tanks, and then the waste activated sludge, so the sludge that was treated and to waste would be going to the aeration pond, the current aeration pond. So the current aeration pond would be converted to a waste storage.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So the return activated sludge is viable still to the treatment process. So if we're returning to the aeration tanks, we'll call them the constructed aeration tanks. The waste activated sludge would be wasted to the current aeration pond, and we would be converting that to a storage facility for the waste activated sludge.
Okay, so nothing would end up in the secondary lagoon.
Correct. Nothing would end up in the current stabilization lagoon. We are looking to modify a portion of that lagoon system for an equalization storage. And then the remainder of the lagoon is through consultations through the engineering and staff thoughts and ideas. We're unsure as to where that will end up right now, which also adds to the decision to maybe hold off on sludge removal for the remainder of the stabilization lagoon, as it will be taken offline. Essentially, no material will be going into the current lagoon system.
Follow up? Okay. So if we're going to be using the aeration pond for return activated sludge, The question I had was, how frequently will we need to desludge it? And I reached out to Mr. Morcom and he told me that probably every 2 years. Okay. If I use our costs from our last desludging operation, which was only 30-odd% of the northern part of the pond, and recognizing that the aeration lagoon, I think, is 0.68 hectares, and you want to maintain the depth for the biosolid settlement, I think it's fairly safe to assume it's going to cost us at least 600,000. And if we may wave our magic wand and make inflation go away, that tells me that over the next 20 years, we'll be looking at $6 million minimum for desludging. Does that sound logical to you?
Director?
I think I'm going to defer to Matthew or Susan for that clarification on Councillor Farada's point.
Thank you, Mr. Markham.
Yes, through the chair. We have looked at the amount of solids, and so Adam is correct that the intent is to store the WAS in the waste activated sludge in the current aeration lagoon. It currently has storage for about 2 years of solids in there. Based on the modeling that we've completed, we should be generating somewhere between 5,500 and 6,500 cubic meters per year of sludge. And based on a survey of the amount of disposal cost of sludge in the area, it works out in the current design somewhere between about $150,000 to $200,000 per year of sludge disposal is what it would work out to. Now, if you were to continue to put it in the facultative lagoon, the larger surface area lagoon, we did look at that as part of when we were looking at what to do with sludge. Because you're taking the sludge and spreading it over a much larger area, the cost of desludging, the equipment needed, it takes longer to take us a smaller, narrower, or a less thick layer of sludge off the bottom, tends to add more cost to that. So your costs would go up to do it in the larger lagoon versus containing it in the smaller area.
Do you have a follow-up, or can I go to someone else?
Kind of a follow-up.
Go ahead. Kind of a follow-up.
Kind of a follow-up. So basically, other than some flow management with the facultative lagoon, it becomes the still body of water prone to algae and odor. Or are you contemplating additional measures such as more aeration to help control those conditions in that secondary lagoon?
Through the chair, we haven't finalized what we're doing with that larger lagoon. We are aerating the WAS lagoon. The intent was not to aerate the current lagoon. There should be enough liquid on there to maintain odors. But you are correct. We haven't, in consultation with staff, haven't decided what we want to do with that larger lagoon. We are still working through some value engineering. We've gotten to the 30%. There is still a value engineering session that we have to kind of work our way through, which one of those is to look at and figure out, is there alternatives that we want to use the larger lagoon now if it is now offline.
Follow-up.
Thank you. So if I understand correctly, because there's still a value engineering part to be done on the facultative lagoon, the number that alleges that this mechanical system is less costly than the lagoon system is incorrect, because there's that additional cost that needs to be added into this.
Mr. Markham.
Through the chair, if I understand your question correctly, you're saying that the lagoon-based system would be less expensive than, or the sludge that's...
No, I don't believe that's true. Clarify, please, Councilor.
Just to clarify, no, I'm not suggesting that at all, but the mechanical system has been presented to us as a more cost-effective option, but you've just acknowledged that there's an issue with the secondary lagoon essentially being a dormant body of water, and we need to do something to maintain it, control odors and algae and that sort of stuff. And it's subject to a value engineering exercise to determine what additional capital costing will be required to address that problem, so that the number that's been presented to us, or the varying numbers, are not accurate for the mechanical system because of that additional cost. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Markham.
Through the chair. So the intent right now, and the thought was that that area would remain as it is. And the stormwater or anything of rain that falls into that would be brought back into the EQ and brought through the system. But it could remain as is and be dealt with at a later date.
Thank you both. Councillor Rowley.
I'm going to wait for a few minutes to.
Thank you. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you. So that cost would be determined at a later date, is what I heard?
I think what to do,
What
and
to
therefore the
do,
cost
the
will be
cost.
determined at a later date. Yeah.
So we're not committing to costs. So in my business, we work with a lot of rural properties who have a lot of creative ways to manage waste on a much smaller scale. A pool of waste sludge that just gets refilled by rainwater and perhaps evaporates off, or perhaps it's still going to be polished in the wetland. We call that a cesspool, and I'm sure that the ministry is going to have some questions about how we manage that as well. Is there someone who can answer that through the chair?
Mr. Markham.
Yes, there is still some consultation with the ministry to understand what to do with that piece. As I mentioned, the intent is to continue to drain that to a level that we can maintain into the EQ area, which then will be put back through the plant. So there will be a flow flowing through it.
And that flow would prevent stagnation. Is that
that is the current intent? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. In going through the documentation that was provided, the original OPC estimate for the lagoon-based upgrade per tab 1, page 69, indicated a cost of 23.1 million, inclusive of headworks and contractor markup. But in the May 21-24 report, the attachment that we were provided indicated a cost of 22.5 million before contractor markup. And if I add the 20%, it comes to 27.6. Can you explain to me why it changed from having the markup in it to not having the markup in it?
Mr. Markham.
I would have to look at that one specifically, but normally we include the markup. And then as we refine the cost estimates, we look at materials, supply, and then general markup.
As a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, follow-up to that whole documentation. In reading the December OPC for the lagoon-based system, I'm wondering if somebody could provide me with a English translation of two terms that I'm not familiar with. There's one line at the bottom that talks about an extended duration mobilization cost adder and establishes a value of $400,000. And right below that is a mobilization cost adder due to extended duration. It seems like a bit of doublespeak and a repetition, but perhaps it means something, but I don't understand what it is. Could you clarify for me, please?
Mr. Markham.
Through the chair, yes, I can clarify that, and maybe we should have been a little clearer on this. So the first item, the extended duration mobilization cost of 8 months, is in order to construct the original option 1, which was dividing up the aeration lagoon. The way we had to sequence that versus building the plant offline and off to the side and be able to build the whole thing and then bring it online was the construction duration would be extended by 8 months. From option 1 to option 2 would be 8 months shorter. So the extended duration mobilization cost is the contractor's cost to be here longer for an additional 8 months. And what we should have called the mobilization cost at or due to extended was the increased cost of equipment and labor to extend the duration by 8 months based on inflation. So it's an inflationary cost of, we estimated that we would have to carry over approximately $4 million of work that would be extended into that 8 months. And $4 million at an assumed inflation rate of 5% works out to the $200,000 that's listed there.
Thank you both. Councillor Rowley.
First of all, could Councillor Fredis just give me that page number he was just dealing with? I was having a hard time in all of this pages just to find that. I want to reread that myself, please.
Tab 1, page 69.
69. Okay, thank you. Just going in a little bit of a different direction for 2 seconds. Mr. Walraven, you mentioned earlier that there are many of these systems in Ontario and they seem to be working pretty successfully. Are there any examples nearby that I'm kind of visual that council could have take a tour of at some point? I don't know. We spoke earlier of the different communities here close by. Is there one that we could at some point maybe have an arrangement to visit one of these systems, one of these facilities?
Mr. Walraven.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Rowley. Maybe I would call on Matthew Morcom to address that. He may have a little better insight as to what municipalities would kind of be on the same treatment, program as we're potentially heading. So,
Mr. Morcom.
Through the chair, yes, we can certainly arrange to have you visit. Frankfurt is one that has a very similar system. If I'm not mistaken, Colburn also has a conventional activated sludge with aeration and clarifiers and disinfection. And there's multiple more. I could probably pull out many more in Ontario and in the area that we could talk to some clients and have a full tour of them for sure.
And it's a little different, but we've all driven past the one at CFB Trenton on our way to Belleville. It's right there as you it's right there on the right, beside the cadet barracks.
So can I make that suggestion later on in the meeting that we tour some?
I think you already did. And
You then.
and I know the CAO is making notes and arranging for tours for us right now. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. I recently took the via through Port Hope and looked out the window and saw something that looks a lot like these schematics. So in a slightly different direction again, I love that the recommendation includes things that could be with it or could proceed or could not, depending on how much money we want to spend. Again, I tend to be future oriented. And so if we can build it now to save money later, that's great. So with regard to the administration building, glad that we're looking at an administration building. Typically, I work with residential buildings, and I know that there's a difference in quality or grade between a residential build and an institutional build or industrial build. So I get that. I am still curious about why an administration building that seems to have fairly normal facilities, with the possible exception of the lab, costs $2.5 million. Can anyone explain why it's so expensive?
Mr. Morcom.
I think you are correct. There is a different level of quality of the work and the level of construction that a commercial building of this style will have. We did look at alternative options to designing this building and more cost-effective ones. The hard part and the concern was that in a wastewater facility, that going with, say, a metal cladded building that's a little, or with structural steel is a little bit more cost effective, but will over time, being with a corrosive environment, near a corrosive environment, may hinder its lifespan. So in discussions with staff, it was decided that this would be the more long-term solution for this.
Thank you both. Councillor Fredis.
Just to follow up on Councillor Wielder's question, are you talking an admin building or a headworks building?
Mr. Markham?
Through the chair, we were talking about the admin building, so
And that's distinct from the headworks building?
correct.
Okay, thank you. So just to talk about headworks for a moment, if I may, to the chair. The headworks cost on tab 1, page 27 shows a headworks cost of $5.3 million, including contractor markup. But the December OPC indicates a cost of 3.4 million. And if I add 20% to that, I get to 4.1. So my first question is, can somebody explain why the difference of $1.2 million? Secondly, page 27 shows grit removal at $240,000, but the December summary provided to us does not show that. Could somebody clarify that? The December report shows septage at $100,000, but what we know from another page in the report is it's actually $1.93 million. If I ignore the septage thing and just incorporate the other, I'm looking at a differential of 5.4 versus 4.4. So my question is, why is there $1 million difference between the report we received in May versus what's in this manual? Can anybody clarify that for me?
Mr. Markham?
I would have to go back. I don't know if I can fully answer your question. If I can't follow all those cost estimates, and I will say that the cost estimates do change over time. And so we get more refined with the design and in consultation with staff of the preferences of the types of equipment and those types of things. So I would say that's probably one factor. The other thing to keep in mind is that the cost estimate you're referring to, where it has the septage at say $100,000, I think is that was a cost comparison table between option 1 and option 2, and not necessarily a cost of the entire project. At the time when we were doing it, we hadn't made, say, for instance, on the septage, we were still working with staff to decide whether that was going to be in or not. So we had a placeholder in there just to account for some costs. We hadn't made the decision on what type of septage that would look like and the different details of it. So I just want to be clear that that was meant to compare the cost of option 1 and option 2. So costs that were similar to both, i.e. the septage would be the same no matter what option you chose there, would have the same cost.
Follow up?
Just to follow up, and so thank you for the explanation. It's a placeholder. It just reaffirms that many of the numbers we see are not accurate, and I'm still having difficulty coming to grips with the fact that the fixed bioreactor, it really is the cheaper option when I start to add in some of these other variables. Now, that having been said, just to carry on with Headworks, RVA indicated in their peer review that they countered the GSS submission to pre-screen before the clarifier in order to protect downstream facilities on tab 1, page 22-23. Now, the mission has always been to address TAN and secondly, capacity shortcomings. And in our last discussion with JLR, when we asked the question about the impact of TAN that Headworks had, the acknowledgement from Ms. Shu was none. So in looking at the Headworks summary page, it indicates it's an expenditure of $2.4 million for a building to house the equipment justified. So now we're looking at $4 million in buildings, admin, and a Headworks building. My question was, is this equipment not durable enough to operate outdoors? And Mr. Markham had indicated to me that they had initially proposed no building, but something changed somewhere. So my question again is, can this equipment operate outdoors or not? Does it really need a $2.4 million building? Or could we hire a local builder to build a $700,000 two-story house to cover this stuff and save us a lot of money. Director Whiteman or Mr. Markham, whichever would like to respond.
It's just for the record, Councillor Wheeldon departed from the council chambers at 4:08 p.m. Mr. Markham?
Yeah, through the chair, I can certainly answer that question. There's a couple of questions there. So the cost estimating, it is an ongoing process as we continue to refine that. So you are correct that the Headworks building had in our tech memo that we had produced as part of the 15%, we had looked at 3 different options of Headworks. With a variety of complexity from a very basic outdoor equipment to a full building. The issue that you run into Headworks specifically related to the building and why the building ends up costing so much is because of the corrosive environment. In the Headworks, it's what's called a rated area. And as a rated area, there's risk of explosion. And because of the fumes and the gases that are coming off in a Headworks building specifically. And as that, we have to have special electrical equipment, special building materials to ensure that that doesn't happen. To answer your question, yes, there is equipment that can be placed outside. I will offer up that we are also working on a variety of projects for other municipalities that have outdoor facilities that are now enclosing them because of the problem they have with maintaining that equipment and having consistent treatment because of issues with Headworks going down, clogging up equipment, and having other issues with it.
Thank you both. Anyone else on council have any questions? Councilor Wright.
I've been sitting here chewing on the 15% deadline not having been met when things kind of diverged. Have there been any other deadlines, either ours or MECP deadlines, that have not been met? And if so, has there been any impact to our coffers?
Director Whiteman.
I think our 30% design was came out recently, don't know when, June sometime, and we did not meet that. We were out about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but we were also on pause, and it contributed to a little bit of delay. So in terms of the MECP, I don't think they have any deadlines. They're just concerned that we comply. And that's really what they have communicated to us and held our feet to the fire in so doing. And that's basically it at the end of the day. So I think I've answered, I hope I've answered your question.
Did that 2-week delay cause any additional cost to the municipality?
It could be. I can't answer directly, but there is a delay. I think we did eventually get the 30% in. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago that it was submitted to the MECP. And maybe I don't think we are too delayed in our process, but it doesn't help to in where we are at this point in time.
Councilor Wright, did you have a follow-up?
Yes. Sorry, just trying to follow my train of thought, which is going all over the place at the moment. So, but we do have a deadline with the MECP for September.
That's correct.
Can you just remind me, please?
They want, as far as I know, the construction drawings and tender documentation by that point in time.
Councilor Butwell.
Through the chair to Mr. Morcom, I guess, being the representative of JLR. So Joe Richards has a very long history of working with many municipal partners, over 70 years, as I understand it. Were concerns ever raised by anyone on your team that the council of the municipality of Brighton had not approved the shift to this new plan? And why would JLR continue working and incurring costs knowing that they have not been approved? Knowing that this project has not been approved because of your, I mean, I would just wonder why a firm who has such a strong history and would understand that we were not kept abreast of this would continue working with staff on things that they didn't have the power to make decisions about. Just in the last 10 minutes in hearing you answer questions, 5 times you made reference to staff has decided or the decisions of staff. But none of those decisions actually carry any weight without the direction of council. So can you explain why you continue to go ahead?
How would J.L. Richards know that council hadn't been kept informed?
I'm just deciding on how to phrase this so that it, at what point did J.L. Richards come to understand that council had no knowledge of this? And I'll leave the question right there.
Mr. Markham?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, we work with representatives of council, which is staff. They provide us the direction. We were not aware until the scope change request and these proceedings with the ask to come and present at the last meeting that council was not aware of where we were going with things. We don't generally monitor council reports of every municipality to ensure that they are being kept up to date.
As a follow-up?
It is a follow-up. So when you came to present or were asked to come to present, you were aware at that point that we were not aware. We had not been informed of all of the steps taken along the way. And not in a, so you had not known up until then, but then you did know. And we have moved from 15% to 30%. So why would JLR continue to perform duties that at this point, there's no assurance that they're going to be compensated for if you don't obtain council approval?
I would suggest they'll be compensated either because we pay the invoice or because the courts order us to.
So why are we here as a council, Mr. Mayor?
Because council directed this meeting so that we could go through these
The
documents.
greater question being, why are we here? If staff can just go on and commission reports, hire consultants, hire lobbyists, do all of these things without the gatekeepers of the purse strings. We are here, we're elected to protect the municipality and the people and their tax dollars. And we are talking about a project here in this new facility that was proposed, it sounds like proposed by the consultants, but approved by staff. We're talking about over $40 million.
That's correct.
Over $40 million that this municipality cannot afford. I understand that the user pays for a portion of it, but we have to pay for this up front. We don't have the room in our borrowing budget to do any of this. And I cannot believe that we're being pigeonholed into a September date because no one told us. And it was, why was no one telling us anything? Why was nobody at the council level aware of this? Nobody. Because I would guess that you, Mr. Mayor, if you had known, you would have let the CAO know, or you would have let some of us know, or all of us know, because you know the rules. Those things need to come to council. Why? Who's going to wear this? Because I don't think we as a council should wear this. And perhaps this is a discussion that needs to take place in a closed session. But $40 million being spent and we're being cornered into paying this. I have a big problem with this, and a few extra $100,000 to put the brakes on it and go back to what we had approved. Because as far as I'm concerned, we've approved A, not B.
Right, but A is an experimental system that probably won't work.
I have spoken to Mr. Arpana of the MECP myself on several occasions. He said the math works for both. We decide.
Well, then why did the MECP ask us to go down this road?
He was very clear. The MECP did not ask us. They were approached by JL Richards and they were told, the MECP was told that JL Richards said this one is cheaper when it is very clearly not cheaper. They said, we don't care what you do as long as it works.
As long as it works. Councillor Wheeldon.
Through the chair to Councillor Butwell, on what basis do we say that it's very clearly not cheaper? Councillor Fredis brought up that a lot of the numbers in these reports are estimates, but they are estimates for both projects. We can be assured that they've actually done their work and that the estimates are reasonable, though subject to change, because everything changes. But on what basis are you saying that it's clearly not cheaper?
Go ahead. If you want to answer that question, you go ahead.
I will answer as best I can. So through you, Mr. Chair, to my esteemed colleague across from me. The original project, we'll call it the hybrid project, because it has components of our old system and a new system. So I've taken to calling it the hybrid and the mechanical. The hybrid project, I think had we had the individuals here from some of the other consulting firms, they might, if we asked them the direct question, how much would this first hybrid update cost? I think we're going to be getting numbers under $15 million. So I have spoken with people. I'm not going to put names on it, but if we wish to invite them for another meeting, I think that that's very useful. And JL Richards, the representative, said when they were here last that, what were they, class 4 or level 4 or D, class D estimations? That's just shot in the dark work. So we have one firm that has peer reviewed another and is still willing to stand by a certain dollar figure. And we have another that is almost tripling it. So, and here for 30 some odd million dollars, we're still only getting 4,600 cubic meters.
But the first system requires us to somehow take the system offline.
And there was
How do we get people to stop flushing their toilets for 18 months? We don't. That's the answer, which means we need to haul septage somewhere. And that costs money. $2 to $3 million as I understand it. Which is why they want to build a building for $2 to $3 million to collect that, so that we can then have a building that we use in the system as we move it forward. All said, we find ourselves in a position where we're angry because we weren't informed. And I would suggest to this council, maybe not, but I would suggest that had we had the ability to make this decision when we should have been making this decision, this is the decision we would be making. We would be looking at a mechanical sewage treatment plant. Every single mechanical engineer that I've spoken to over the last 6 months, about half a dozen or so, when I introduce the subject, without hesitation, say, oh, you need a mechanical sewage treatment plant, period. Everything else is experimental. And we should be here saying we're done experimenting on Brighton's wastewater treatment facility. We're done pouring chemicals into a system that isn't going to treat ammonia. We have to go down this road. We are a big grown-up municipality now. And what we have is a system that was never designed to treat ammonia. And if we continue to tinker with that system, we will never treat the ammonia. And now that the MECP has been alerted to the fact that council is unsure about what it wants to do, I guarantee you, if we don't go down this road, and yes, we are being pigeonholed today, we will be fined. I guarantee you. Because if I were the enforcement branch of the MECP listening to this today, which I guarantee they are, they'll be here tomorrow if we don't make the right decision tonight. And I don't like that, but that's where we are. Councilor Rowley.
Thank you. So I think let's turn the temperature down a little bit. I think there is frustration for sure. But Mayor, you are correct. We've been looking at this for far too long. The past is the past. We need to move forward. And if we don't move forward, as you say, we're going to be in bigger trouble than we are now. It's a big dollar amount. It's really too bad that previous councils, you've been on them, I've been on them. We've been sitting on our hands far too long, thinking that we're saving the bucks and that we've got staff who can just fix everything. And I just don't like where this conversation is going. I want to move forward. We need to fix it. That's it.
And I agree with you. And back in 2020-ish, I'm thinking, no, before that, 2016-ish, when I sat on council with former Councillor Martinello, who fought, and John, if you're listening, I'm going to fall on my sword here for you, who fought hard for a mechanical sewage treatment plant because he knew that that was the system that would treat the ammonia and be a scalable, expandable system for a 50-year growth in the municipality. He knew it. And John sometimes maybe had some ways of speaking that got people's backs up. And I think maybe more than often that's what led us down the road we went down, which was to choose a membrane bioreactor system that all of us in the room thought would probably not be the best way to go. It was just a larger biodome system that failed back in 2012-ish, 2013. So yeah. So, I know we've been tinkering and we've been supporting organizations to use chemicals, to add aerators, to do all the things because we want this lagoon system to work because it's a naturalized system and it seems to make sense. It was never designed to treat ammonia. And so here we are. And if we want to continue to grow in this municipality and we don't want to suspend development, which I think we probably shouldn't want to do, then we need a mechanical sewage treatment plant. John was right. John, if you're listening, you're right.
And just to add to that a little bit, historicals as well. We were always too cheap.
Yeah, here.
Let's just put it out there. The focus was always on getting the most and spending the least. And we are now at the other end of that. And so, like you said, yes, mistakes were made. I was there, you were there. Lucky the rest of you weren't, because we can wear a little bit more of this than some for sure. But that has always been, and I think we have always put way too much stress and way too much work on our staff, only to keep it going for nickels and dimes instead of hundreds of dollars. And this is where we are today. And now those dollars that we saved, we haven't saved a nickel. Now we're farther ahead.
That's absolutely correct. Councillor Furenes.
Through the chair, thank you. Understanding the history of Brighton Council and inactivities in days gone by, and the chickens have finally come home to roost. I will say that I am not happy with the price tag and the variation in numbers that I'm seeing. I would expect that this can be clarified in fairly short order. There's some frills and stuff in here that I don't quite buy into. That are problematic for me. But that having been said, what I would acknowledge is that all of the key criteria outlined by R.V. Anderson in their peer review are encompassed in this proposal. And that carries a great deal of weight with me, okay? However, this is the thing that also troubles me. The Hughes funding, as you know, is $825 million with a limit of one project per municipality. Mr. Markham has indicated that he understands that there are some 208 applications in for this funding at the moment. And when I asked him what he thought the average grant request was, he calculated about 10 million per. My calculator tells me that's $2.08 billion against 825 million. A shortfall of $1.25 billion. So I have to ask, can we reasonably expect to get any funding? If it's equally distributed to the 208 applicants, which is highly unlikely, we'd see $3.7 million against the 40 million that we need. Now, our application, our Hughes application, and I think I cited the page earlier, shows that we'll only build 310 units between now and 2031. This whole fund was designed to drive growth. What growth have we demonstrated in that application? Now, the MECP is demanding that we fix the TAN issues or they're going to fine us. But I have a very simple question, Premier Ford. Where's the check with your signature? We'd start tomorrow and I'd fully support it. So my question of council and staff is, if we don't get the funding, what's our backup plan?
Just note that the Premier doesn't sign the checks. It's the chair of the Treasury Board, Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. My understanding of the backup plan is the next round of funding and the next round of funding and the next round of funding. I think that the only reason to make core infrastructure into a grant application program is because you don't want to pay for it all. I think that we're not the only municipality looking at that shortfall and saying there's got to be more coming or we're in trouble. The reality is, though, that if we need this, whether someone's willing to pay for it or not, there isn't really a way around the project in general. We're not going to come back around the table in 5 years and say, yeah, I guess we just decided to pay 5 years worth of fines. At a certain point, because of the growth that we're experiencing, our system not working now is going to be really not working later. So we get started and continue to ask for money to keep it going, is my impression.
Councillor Boutwell.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not going to apologize for my anger. I will, however, say I should temper it a little bit more. Look, I accept that if we have gotten to the point where it's time to pay the piper, I accept that. And I accept that this may be the better solution. My question is, how do we pay for this? We don't have any money left in our borrowing, do we, Director Whitfield? Hold on.
Director.
So unfortunately, through you, Mayor, unfortunately, we have been experiencing more and more borrowing in our budgets. And we had approximately 32 million that we could borrow based on the 2021 FIR. And so that, of course, is going to, I don't know that we've taken on that much borrowing. We've done it mostly internally since the rates went up. And some of those projects will never be borrowed externally because we're paying them off annually to ourselves. But I think that we have to really sit back and take a really good calculation of what we're going to have to borrow for the projects already approved. And I believe when I look at the grant application, it was somewhere around 29 million that we were hoping to get from the province and the federal government for this infrastructure upgrade, or new infrastructure. So we would have to, if we would have to borrow internally, we would have to actually go to the MFOA and petition to have our external borrowing amounts increased. And then it's all on the wastewater ratepayers to pay for that infrastructure. Also, another thing to consider, because I've heard you talking about the extra capacity, we could build in the extra capacity. And we're going down that road a little bit with maybe even setting it up with this current design for the ability to expand. That expansion would be growth related, and that growth related expansion would have to be collected or could be collected through our development charges or impost fees. And so I think that council needs to not think about that 17 million or whatever that cost may be, just put it on the back burner for now, and just look at what's in front of us. And I think that might be more helpful.
Councillor Boutwell, a follow-up.
Yes, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're looking at when I said how much is left in our borrowing? Ballparkish.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butwell, I would have to go back and do a calculation, and I'd be happy to do so and send an email to council tomorrow and let you know where we are.
Okay.
Because as I said, there's a lot of projects that we have to initiate that external borrowing right now because we've already started them and we haven't initiated that borrowing. So we have to look at what that capacity is and how that reduces the capacity that we had in our annual repayment limit, which was somewhere around 33 to 35 million.
Okay, and then perhaps I could follow up to whomever might be able to answer this. The major projects that we have on the go, first one that comes to mind is the Fryer Station. What's another one, another big one? Prince Ed-
Prince Edward Street next year. But we're committed. Harbor Street, is that on the books?
No, I think it's just Marina that we have on the books.
On the, so Marina Drive at $1 million or so dollars. $1 million for Main Street. Or so, not
like-
quite.
I just,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I just don't want to say.
We look forward to your email tomorrow.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you. Councillor Fredis.
Just to throw some numbers out, my recollection is our current external borrowing is about 10 mil. If we add Prince Edward, the fire hall, I think it's 8. Someone else has suggested it's about 10. And some land banking initiatives, we're pushing 20. Even if we get the grant, based on the 41 we asked for, we're on the hook for about 11. So we're at the 32 range. If we don't get it, it blows us. Oh, and I haven't added Prince Edward in there, which was, I think, another 4 million, something like that. So we're right at the edge. If we don't get the grant and have to fund it all, the 40 million blows us right through the 39 million ceiling, right? You talked about ratepayers paying it. Just to even the ratepayers paying our share of the grant, the existing ratepayers, and I've used a figure of 8 million, not the 11 that it computes out to at the 27%. We would have to raise their rate from $1.81 to $2.68, which is a 48% increase just to pay for this on our share of the grant. You don't want to know the number if we have to foot the whole 40 million.
Quadruple it.
I mean, it'd be a great time to pick up real estate really cheap because people would leave in one big hurry. So, again, I come back to, this is a serious issue. We don't have a backup plan. And there are some big dollars. And it keeps me awake at night.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
I just want to remind council that our MPP was quite direct about saying that he's got our back and he's going to be working for us to help get this funding. I just wanted to give a shout out to Minister Pecuniary.
Wise, thank you. I think I think that the minister, our MPP, is fully supportive of our grant application, understanding that there's another 207 municipalities, all with MPPs, who would be very supportive of their application. Some of whom will also be in cabinet. So we can, hope to Councillor Fredis's point. Hope is not a plan. But we need to move forward, I think. We need to get the steps in order and start begging for the money. And that's where we're at. I would also point out that municipalities who do get to their borrowing limit are statistically more likely to get grants given to them by the province and the federal government. And I don't like that, but it's the reality that we face. I would prefer a world where those of us who have been fiscally responsible and not edged up to our borrowing capacity would be rewarded for that, but that doesn't appear to be the way the world works. And in a world where there's more infrastructure needs and there is money to pay for it, I also understand that as well. So go ahead, Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, Councillor Wheeldon had indicated other grant streams, and I've heard about them as well, but as we've typically seen, when they tell you they're coming and when they actually get here are two different time frames quite often. And in the backdrop of that, we have the MEC breathing down our neck with fines. It could be 2 years before we see another fund come along. The other thing to bear in mind, it's my understanding that this original Hughes fund is a 3-year phase-in, which suggests that there is going to be some funding or financing required on our part as this construction goes on, because it'll be 3 years out before we see all the money, particularly if we build in 2 years. So there is a whole lot of additional financing costs that are not built into these calculations. That doesn't dissuade me from saying we need to do something, because, you know, the chickens have come home to roost and we need to address this problem. But I would like us all to be cognizant of the money thing and the challenge that we're going to have. And I guess if we need to take some ministers to lunch, Jeff, where would you like to take them? I'll drive. How's that?
Councillor Wheeldon, don't answer that question.
I will not, but I do want to point out that the numbers that we have, the $41 million does include $6.5 million in financing charges. So that has been accounted for. But yes, your general point is well taken. It's a lot of money, and we are taking steps without being able to account for it all. And that is scary. And we're not really given a lot of options. So sucks. I think none of us like where we're at. But that's the system that we work within. We are being required to take those steps and being told that there should be something there for us when we need it. I think that if and when there isn't, it will not. It will create a political pressure that will result in us getting what we need when we need it. But that is a bit of a step of faith nonetheless.
Yeah, and the good news is if we are granted the HEWSF money, I believe it's entirely provincial, and the province tends to write checks a little bit faster, well, significantly faster than we've seen out of the federal government, which when we were granted the money, which was a joint provincial federal program for Main Street, first we had to beg for the grant, we got the grant, and then we had to beg for the check to be written. So it took another 6 months or more for the federal government to release their funds to the province so that the province could write the check to us. So I think it's good news that we're just dealing with one level of government. It's always easier. And I think it's good news that that level of government is our provincial friends. So Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you. I will try and make this the last one, but I can't promise. I was delighted to hear Director Whitfield refer to impost fees. I think it is vital that we have them. I have one issue though with the presentation that we received is we have the numbers backwards. We have a higher rate for water than wastewater. And if I look at Kingston's charts and virtually every other location that uses those sorts of things, wastewater is always the higher number and not water. So when you're setting aside funding, it has a huge difference. If you use them collectively, and I round the number to say $10,000, and if I use the 1,700 units that Director Walsh has determined are developments and stuff that are on the horizon, I think that's about $17 million, which basically would pay for the capacity expansion here and now. I just throw that out there for consideration.
Director Walsh,
I'll take the risk and move out of my bailiwick for a moment
good luck.
and just say that when we look at the draft approval lots of 855 plus the pre-consultation dwelling units of 1,723, there's a total of 2,578 units. You divide 40 million by that number and it's 15,516 per home. In comparison, a new well is 20,000, a new septic is 20,000, the service a rural lot is 40,000. So an urban lot at that rate is half price less. Just some context, depending on how you slice the numbers, and I'll leave that for other people.
Fair point. And the costs that are borne by the rural residents for the maintenance of those systems, which is ongoing, it tends to be annualized, but as a well and septic user, I know that we don't write checks anymore, but we send a lot of money electronically to contractors who do things like pump out our septic tank and treat our well. And I tend to be the maintenance person inside, so thank you to our water department who manages it for the other 7,000 people in the community. There's just, there's a lot goes on a rural property that isn't done by our staff here at the municipality. We done with this conversation? Can I read the motion again? Councillor Rowley?
Well, then, if we're done, I just want to compliment staff, regardless of where there have been glitches. This has been a monumental project. It's a big job. And you guys have done your best, I'm sure. And so I appreciate that. Support exactly where your expertise is and where you think we should go with this. So thank you.
Thank you. And the CAO has some final comments. Before I turn it over to you, CAO, you all know in this room that I am incredibly supportive of staff and endeavor to do so at every turn. To say I am monumentally disappointed that we have come here would be no exaggeration at all. And that my expectation, CAO and directors moving forward, is that this will never, ever happen again. That council will be kept informed on every project we approve. And I don't care how small the change is, a staff report is required for council, even if it's not a dollars and cents issue. The people of Brighton expect us to know what's going on. And if we don't, well, shame on all of us at the end of the day. So that's my message, CAO. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I understand that this is a difficult situation for council to be in, and I appreciate the conversation today. When we look at, going from the 15 to the 30%, things moved very, very quickly. And during that time, you replaced your CAO. I know this staff did not work maliciously, tried to keep the project moving and make the best decisions that they could make. But we've also had conversations about how the information must come to council. I am confident. I've worked with a lot of consultants. I'm confident in J.L. Richards' ability to bring this project forward for us, and the conversations that we've had. And I hear your concerns, and I just want to say you can be rest assured that this information will come to council. Every step along the way, this project as well as others. This isn't the only one we've uncovered where council hasn't been informed. So I will apologize for that. We will work very hard to make sure that council rebuilds that trust in staff and that we continue to be forthcoming in the information. With that, I will just add to the financing component. Should we not be successful, that will be another challenge for us to come back with. Certainly, we will be looking for some political influence and some assistance to try to find some funding. But we will continue to look at grant applications. With this one being solely provincial, we may have federal opportunities as well beyond this. So we will continue to look as we address expansion and all those kinds of things. So just rest assured that we will be doing that in the background as well.
Thank you, CAO. I'll read the motion again. It's moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the report dated July 16th, 2024, wastewater treatment facility background and historical context update, and approved continuing to move forward with upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility inclusive of the following scope changes as recommended to council on May 21st, 2024. The council approve additional funding resulting from scope changes required to augment the design for the upgrade to the Brighton Wastewater Treatment Facility, referring to the staff report entitled Award of the Request for Proposal PW 2023-07, Brighton Wastewater Treatment System Upgrade. Dated June 19th, 2023, for which the engineering design consultants JL Richards and Associates Limited were awarded RFP PW 2023-07. Although the initial award for the RFP was over budget by $161,228.54 net of the HST rebate, the design consultants, JL Richards, have recently issued 6 scope changes. The following scope changes have been issued and requested by them for a total amount of $406,923.99 net of the HST rebate. Scope change 1, request change to undertake a Schedule B addendum, total $20,235.99 net of HST rebate. Scope 2, support of the HEWSF application, total $5,342.40 net of HST rebate. Scope 3, design consideration from VE exercise, total $127,963.20 net of the HST rebate. Scope 4, scope change 4, design requirements for additions or modifications, total $131,779.20 net of the HST rebate. Scope change 5, design for receiving septage, total $75,556.80 net of the HST rebate. Scope change 6, additional water required for building and firefighting resulting option 2, total $46,046.40 net of the HST rebate. Total scope changes 1 through 6 total $406,923.99 net of the HST rebate. And that council direct additional funds for the design of the upgrade to the WWTF is estimated to be $568,152.53 net of the HST rebate. This amount is inclusive of work involving scope changes, scope change number 1 through scope change number 6, along with the original amount that was over budget for the award of the RFP. The design consultants have indicated that no additional scope changes are foreseen in completing the design of the upgrade to the WWTF. Is there any final discussion? Councillor Ferretis.
To the chair, I guess I come back to the earlier question I raised relative to scope 5. If you accept my numbers, there is no merit in spending $75,000 to septage for an operation that has an 86-year payback. So I guess the question of council is, would you agree we should take that out of the scope change and just forget that aspect and move forward on that, on the rest?
I would rather direct staff to provide a business case.
Okay.
And I say that simply because if we're going to chew up our borrowing capacity for an urban infrastructure project, it would be nice if that urban infrastructure project had a component that at least served the rural area, and that would be the septage intake. So right now, when I pump out my septic tank, it cannot come to Brighton, right? Well, I don't take it anywhere, but the hauler of such cannot bring it to Brighton. So the cost of that, I have to pay for the cost of that transport as a rural resident. Theoretically, my cost would decrease if it was closer. Now, I think that's a pie in the sky at best, but in theory, and at least then I have the satisfaction of knowing that my waste is being treated at my facility here in Brighton, and the carbon footprint is at least that much smaller at the end of the day. But if the business case doesn't work out, I'd be 100% in agreement that we don't go down this road. So how best to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could I just ask a question of the consultant?
Yeah, of course.
If we remove scope change 5 at this stage and staff do some background work, is there any impact in any of the other changes that we're doing that this has on those? Or can we readdress this at a later date to determine if it's something that council wants to move forward with?
Through the chair, it does have an impact because of the capacity that is needed in the rest of the treatment facility. So in that cost estimate of the 1.9 million, of around 600, if I remember correctly, was increased capacity within the existing treatment. So if you were to then decrease that, it would allow, like, if you were to get rid of septage, we could in theory get rid of that, but there are some ramifications on the treatment system itself, yes.
I think that needs a little clarification, Mr. Markham.
Sure. Through the chair, so what I'm getting at is the aeration tanks, the clarifiers, other components within the treatment facility are upsized to include septage. So if we were to reduce that and take that away and try and add it in at a later date, it would affect the design of those systems. Does that make more sense?
Does make sense. CAO?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Matthew. So then can you answer us how much time would we have to bring this back to council? If we had it back to them in 6 weeks, is that going to impact you, or is there any time for us to be able to do this?
I'm sorry, through you, the chair, I'm just trying to see how that would affect schedule, because it's ultimately our schedule back to the ministry if we have to then go back and redesign things for that.
Councilor Wright?
I'm sorry, I'm just having difficulty wrapping my head around that the tanks would be sized to accommodate septage, but we're building to 4,600 meters cubed regardless.
Exactly.
So how does septage impact that negatively if we remove it?
Mr. Markham?
Through you, Chair. So septage, the way the strength of septage that's coming in is a much stronger sewage than typical wastewater that comes in through the sewer, because you're only pumping out the solids in a treatment facility or in a rural septic system. You're only taking out the solids, so the amount of influence strength coming in is much stronger than a typical wastewater coming through a sewer. So that's why we have to increase capacity treatment. The amount of air we put in, the amount of mixing, all of those things has to be more to treat that stronger sewage.
Councilor Boutwell?
So let me tell you how I'm reading that. So it sounds as if that septage comes in, it gets mixed in with additional fluid, water, what have you, what knows. And so there's additional work involved, labor involved to prepare it to be treated like the regular influent. Is that correct?
Mr. Markham?
Through you, the chair. So what it means is that the treatment facility needs to be bigger in order to treat that sewage. So if my point is that if we're deciding whether to take it in or out, we would have to go back and then make things slightly smaller, like a tank smaller or the blower slightly smaller or whatever it may be, in order to allow septage to come in at a later date.
Follow up? For clarification?
Yeah, follow up.
So how many cubic meters are we designing to then? Because those are numbers that we've been accustomed to hearing. So we are designing to treat 4,600 cubic meters, but then we'll design to take in less than that? Or are we putting the infrastructure into design to expand right at the front of this? Does that make sense?
Mr. Markham?
Through you, the chair. Yes. So we are designing for 4,600. In that 4,600 is 31 cubic meters per day of septage that would come in.
Councilor Wheeldon?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Markham, but I think what you're saying is that it's not that you would need to design it for more sewage, it's that it's treated differently if it's septage. And so if we were to say no to this now and try and introduce it later, it would have already influenced how you design the system. Am I picking what you're laying down?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. Yes.
Councilor Boutwell?
So of that 4,600 cubic meters, 31 cubic meters per day is allocated for the septage. Is that what you just said?
He did.
Correct.
That is correct.
So we're taking up capacity for our residents by bringing in capacity from the rural area. That's the idea.
Who are also our residents, as you
We're also
know.
our residents, but our prices are not going to go down as a rural resident. So I really don't care where it goes, here or Quinte West, or Crammy, apparently. I did not realize.
Yeah, probably where it's going.
It's probably going to Crammy. Or there's one local who still puts it on the fields.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So I just by it taking up capacity for that, I would like earmarked for future development in the urban area in order to pay for all of this stuff. I don't think I'm too keen on including it.
So, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
The analysis here, page 37, 1143, says that we get a return if we did 50 M3 per day, but we're only designing for 31. What is the point? And so we build the aeration and tank and clarifiers to handle 4,600. If the world moves and this all of a sudden becomes a great revenue opportunity, and I think you know that I take great pride in my reputation as the ultimate capitalist. If there's the opportunity to make a profit, I'll find it pretty darn quick, but I don't see it. So building in 31 M3, where the economic analysis provided by J.L. Richardson says, assumes haulage fees, $50 per M3, and his 31 M3 capacity gives us an 89-year payout. I mean, what is the point? Clarifiers and the bioreactor tanks, that's one thing, but I don't see it.
Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
I think the value of this is to have a different capability within our plant. As Mr. Morcom said, it's not as much about the total volume capacity as the capacity or the capability of treating a different thickness, for lack of better term, of a different viscosity of material. So I think there's value in having that in case we need it. I think there's value to the rural resident, as the mayor said. I think there's value for the potential for an income stream if the world moves, as Councillor Ferreira says. I don't think it comes down to a simple cost benefit or a simple cash flow analysis on this one. And if changing things at this stage is going to hold up the design moving forward, I would rather err on the side of future capability and capacity than to err on the side of taking what is actually the smallest improvement on the docket off of the list.
So rather than continuing to debate this as an amendment, which we should be just putting an amendment on the floor, and then we can have a quick debate and vote on that and see where council wants to go. So the motion reads that council amend the motion to remove scope change number 5, design for receiving SEPTEDGE. And I assume Councillor Fredis, you're going to move that. And Councillor Butwell as the seconder. Any further comment or question? Go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
Just want a little bit of clarification based on what the CAO said a few minutes ago. How does this impact deadlines from now till December or September?
If the amendment passes, it doesn't affect anything. If the amendment doesn't pass, I would suggest that after we pass assuming we do, the next motion as in its full sum, that we then ask for a business case. Because even though we're designing it, doesn't mean we need to build it at the end of the day. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, Mr. Rand. Through you to the council floor. It sounds like we have been provided by the information from J.L. Richards on the business case. That
They don't provide a business case. I think they just provide some estimates.
Some level
Yeah.
4, level D numbers.
Yeah, level D numbers. And I think a business case would have staff actually calling the septic folks in the municipality and the broader area that serve the municipality and find out what level of, infiltration we could expect.
Because I suspect that for us to make it worth our while and not just a revenue neutral thing, we would have to charge so much that they wouldn't actually even come here.
Maybe not.
And then we've wasted our money. I'm also cognizant of the fact that this is $7,500 just to go ahead and do it, whether we want it or not, in the end, doesn't matter. So, sorry, 75,000.
75, almost $76,000.
76,000, whether or not we actually do it or not, $75,000 is cheaper than $100 and something thousand fine.
Any further discussion on the motion to amend? All those in favor? So this is the amendment. I'll read it again. It's moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council amend the motion to remove scope change number 5, design for receiving septage. All those in favor? Those opposed? I'll do it again. That council amend the motion to remove scope change number 5, design for receiving septage. So if you vote in favor of the motion, we strike scope change number 5. If you vote against the motion, it stays in. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is defeated. So the motion remains as it was, no changes to the motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? All those in favor?
Recorded vote.
Councillor Rowley and or Wright have requested a recorded vote.
Councillor Bobby Wright,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ron Anderson,
Yes.
Councillor Ann Butwell,
Yes.
Councillor Byron Fredis,
Yes.
Councillor Emily Rowley,
Yes.
Councillor Jeff Wielden,
Yes.
Mayor Brian Ostrander.
Yes.
It's carried.
Given that we have kept septage in, I would suggest we then now pass a motion directing staff to provide a business case for septage at the sewage treatment plant.
Which once we receive that, we can still turn it down, correct?
Right.
Thank you.
I will so move.
It's moved by Councillor Wielden, and I need a seconder, that council direct staff to provide a business case on receiving septage at the wastewater treatment facility.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. All right, that brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery or on Zoom that has a question with regard to the topic of tonight's council meeting? This afternoon's council meeting, pardon me. There are none noted. Brings us to our confirmatory bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton Council meeting held on July 16th, 2024. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Wielden, that the July 16th, 2024 special council meeting adjourn at 5:09 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you all very much for the robust discussion. We'll see you tomorrow.